committee.
And then I have Kenneth.
Yes, Kenneth Baldwin, Indian Creek, RPF, steering committee member.
Laura Broadhead.
Hi, BLM. I'm Laura from the BLM, Assistant Field Manager for Recreation.
And I've got Oz.
Hi, Ozalie Welsh. I'm the Forest Health Program Manager at the Trinity County RCD.
All right, Jennifer.
Good afternoon, Jennifer Mata, Field Manager, Reading BLM.
And Amelia.
Amelia Flights, Watershed Program Manager for the Trinity County RCD.
I've got Denise.
Hi, Denise Wesley, GIS Manager for the Trinity County Resource Conservation District.
And I have Colleen.
Where did I go? It disappeared. I'm here.
We got you, Colleen. All right, Jill Cox.
Hi, Jill Cox, Trinity County Board of Supervisors.
And then I have somebody calling in, but it just says iPhone, but it says they're still connecting to audio. So iPhone user, whenever you get in, if you want to say hello, feel free. And I think I got everybody else. If I didn't get you, you can stop me. Okay, and I guess I didn't say hello myself. I'm Kathleen McCulley. I think everybody knows me. Grizzly Corps member for the RCD, primarily, working with Ozalie on community forest strategic plan and other things. Okay, so first of all, any additions or changes to the agenda I sent out? Hearing and seeing silence, so we can get started. So I just wanted to say briefly, if you all hadn't seen in one of me or I think actually Ozalie might have sent this email, that we are getting a new harvest started on the community forest on the BLM side, which is super exciting. And not really talking about that in any official capacity today, but just wanted to say woohoo for anybody on the call that hasn't heard yet. So Kenneth and Oz and I are starting to do kind of the preliminary field work on that. Okay, jumping into the strategic plan. So just like last month, we're kind of going to go through and talk about comments we received or just outstanding questions that we've had that we wanted to discuss with you all. So first up, someone had commented about talking about kind of the current state of attendance of the committee and kind of how recent history maybe. Yeah.
Could you just explain what the two documents that look very similar are?
Yeah, sure. So, excuse me, drink some water, I guess. On the left side of my screen here, we have the Google document, which is kind of the live version of our draft that we work in. And on the right is the PDF that I sent out to the committee, I think last Monday, for people to comment on. So
Okay.
if you haven't looked at, if you're primarily working in the PDF that I sent out and not in the Google document, this one on the right is what you commented on, and on the left, things that we were told to correct or something we might have forgotten, we've added in blue text. And the highlighting you can see in pretty much all the cases are are areas that we kind of had outstanding questions or something we wanted to discuss with the group. So we're just flagging that. So yeah, basically if you see anything in blue, something's been edited and we wanted to, you know, make that easily visible. And otherwise things should be largely the same, except for maybe grammar changes or something.
I do have one comment about that point of the only 4 of approximately 10 original. We might specifically state 4 of approximately 10 original non-agency committee members have continued to be actively involved.
That's a good addition.
Yeah, good point. Thank you, Kelly. Okay, so yeah, similarly, we had a comment about kind of the just, I guess, verifying kind of current attendance of steering committee meetings on average, and whether this has looked similar in recent history. So we said every, you know, committee meetings are generally about 15 people, you know, of the usual suspect attendees. So just wanted to see if anybody else was thinking more or less, or if it has just been less this year because of COVID, you know, that kind of thing. Any objections? All right. Hearing and
Yeah,
seeing
from what
nothing.
I've seen, that's about right. Maybe on the optimistic side, but it's about right.
Sounds good. And as I just saw your comment, I will make you a co-host quickly, if I can find that. Okay. And then I think I just wanted to confirm as well that in also kind of in quote unquote recent history, steering committee meetings have been about quarterly, I think is just kind of what I've heard colloquially. But if some standing committee members want to correct me or confirm. Maybe Pat or Kelly have committee meetings been pretty quarterly.
I don't know. My recollection was that it was more like semi-annually. Besides additional, there'd be like an additional meeting for AOP specifically usually, and then obviously the community meeting.
Okay, so you said
usually one in the-
biannual.
There was yeah.
Okay, does that sound right to everybody?
When I took over from Donna, they were quarterly. And so that's what I had stuck to.
I think they should be quarterly, I guess.
Yeah, we made a guideline that they should be at least quarterly. But okay, sounds like quarterly is correct. So I'm gonna.
I may not have been entirely involved with it at that point.
Okay. And I think a lot of things for today are, some of them are just things I wanted to bring to people's attention to make sure that they didn't get lost in the editing wash. I apologize. It seems like I have the hiccups. But so I apologize if some things are kind of more statements than questions today. Pat recommended we add in a little bit of information about kind of the minority reporting of steering committee decisions. So that's in there. We edited purpose language just slightly based on some comments for clarification and readability. Is there any objections to the new blue text? All right, hearing and seeing nothing. Maybe we'll just skip through this meeting lickety split today. I did want to talk about this last desired outcome. This was largely adapted from the previous strategic plan, but it was brought up in drafting from another commenter that this kind of public perception issue may not be really an issue, may not be something that the steering committee is quite concerned with anymore. So just wanted to see if this even sounds like it belongs to people. I know it's kind of an awkward, I feel like, thing to say. So if we don't need it, we don't need it.
I personally don't feel like it adds much.
This is Pat. I don't know that it really adds much either. I think it may have actually been lifted out of some obscure part of the master agreements with the Forest Service or BLM, the stewardship agreements about working together kind of thing. I mean, it always ends up in every agreement with federal agencies, but I don't know that it really adds much.
Okay. Yeah, I don't have an issue with getting rid of it if that's kind of the consensus decision or consensus opinion. I saw some head shakes. Yes.
I agree.
Okay. Going once, going twice. All right.
That was easy.
Bingo, bango.
Okay, so I think unless there's anything else anybody wanted to discuss about this information, we can move on to the appendix and the guidelines.
This is just a semantics thing. As I'm reading through this, where it says, desired outcomes, and it refers to TCRCD and the larger steering committee. I would propose that it would say something to the tune of more like and the steering committee at large.
Okay, that works for me. Seeing some other head shakes.
Yeah.
Sure.
And I think just for background, I know that's kind of an awkward phrase that we've used a couple of times. And we were thinking, well, like specifically say TCRCD or responsible agencies and the larger steering committee. We just use that because we're talking about responsible, we're talking about this as a committee issue, not maybe only the responsible agencies, but the committee does include the responsible agencies. So we just wanted to make sure we're being crystal clear there.
I mean, the other way to do it would just be to just say steering committee.
Yeah.
Either way, because I just think it's clearer.
Okay.
I'd get rid of it large.
Okay, so sorry, I was doing some formatting. Do people agree kind of across the board so far? Should we just say steering committee?
Yeah, I don't know.
I think that's sufficient.
Yeah.
It just it's like it's just additional added verbiage that doesn't really need to be there, I think.
Okay, sounds good. Yeah, if we can simplify. This one, maybe specifically, I think we might want to identify TCRCD just because BLM and Forest Service aren't necessarily the ones that are conducting steering committee meetings.
Yes.
Yeah, but I think these other two we can just reduce to steering committee if that sounds good to people.
Yep.
Okay.
I agree.
Great. We love simplifying. Okay.
And I think you can get rid of the bold at large.
Yep.
Oh yeah. I had just done that to myself to remind myself to correct any others. But
No, I mean, I
Rid of
think
the
you can
issue.
get rid of the at large.
Oh, just get rid of it entirely?
Yeah, because I mean, it's just, there is no, there's no smaller steering committee. There's just a
Yeah.
steering committee.
That is true.
Yep.
Okay, sounds good to me. And I think, I don't know if you were gonna say something similar, Laura, but it looked like you were talking, but on mute earlier.
I was going to say something different, but I reread it and answered my own question.
Awesome. And we are being efficient today. Okay, so I think we can move on to the appendix if there's no objections. Great. Okay. Alrighty. Okay. So, again, kind of just pointing out some things. So here we wordsmithed again a little bit just for readability. What used to be 1B14 in this original PDF copy, and it was recommended that, or commented, I guess, that it would make more sense as a kind of a bullet point within this related guideline. That makes sense to all. Any objections? All right, looks good. Other minor additions, just for clarity. Let's see. With this guideline, it was noted that we kind of had a lot of dead space just in listing these, only the guideline numbers. So we thought it might be helpful kind of just to summarize basically what they are about. But wanted to run that by everyone. So any objections on that? All right.
So
looking good.
I have a question about, so it says relates to objectives 2 through 4,
Mhm.
but the only things that are brought out are objectives 3 and 4. Is there something from objective 2 that's supposed to be in there?
I think there will be. Objective 2 is responsible forest management, and that one we still haven't had a chance to go and use our new fancy numbering system.
Okay,
But that is on the docket. So this will probably have guidelines from objective 2 as well, and we'll just pull out anything that is kind of decision making related.
okay, that answers it. Thanks.
Yeah. And I think we also, I'm gonna jump ahead a little bit. We had some comments about it seeming a little bit awkward that this trail recreation heavy guideline is in the collaborative decision making objective. And we ended up putting it up here because it's more so kind of about talking about collaborative structure and organization. So I think even though it is on the topic of recreation and trails and that sort of thing, the heart of it really is more collaborative decision making. But it does seem a little bit out of place. So just wanted to get people's opinions on if that actually belongs in objective 3, cultural and community use, or if maybe like the ones we were just looking at, we just list it as the guideline number and say, collaborative recreation management or something. Now that's kind of a complicated question, so let me know if that doesn't.
I don't think it belongs in this objective.
Yeah, I think the second thing you said is better. Incorporate this information where it needs to be incorporated in the recreation section, and then just reference it like those others.
Okay, Sounds good. Make myself a note for that. And I was seeing kind of some head shakes, so just to make sure that's good with everybody, no objections on Laura's suggestion. Okay, sounds good. Let's see. I'm gonna jump back up now. I just wanted to show you all that one specific guideline. So on this guideline, kind of about recruiting new community members to the steering committee, we got a comment concerned about like how do we know we're done recruiting, basically? Like, we don't want to get the entire town of Weaverville on the steering committee, or we'll have too many voices. But I know that, you know, the steering committee also has been kind of a very open, fluid group that welcomes any and all that want to join. So just wanted to bring up maybe if we want to talk about any sort of cap, or just how we know when we're done doing outreach, or if it's just something we do kind of on a rotating basis. If anybody has any thoughts.
I have a quick thought to that you might want to consider, maybe not just as a number of people, but as representation. Like, once we have these groups or facets of the public represented, then we're good, and that's the number of voices maybe that we need.
So interest groups.
Yeah.
Okay. So maybe then we just add a sentence or a bullet that just says, you know, and once, I guess that's a little bit hard to quantify as well. Like, once someone from every interest group is represented, then we're okay.
I think flip it and say that we will conduct outreach to ensure that all kind of interest groups in the community are represented.
That sounds good.
Like, yeah, don't say like we're gonna stop when we reach it.
Yeah, right.
This is our goal.
Because you could have more than one somebody from a
Yeah.
this group. It's
And
not
I
like
kind
the
of,
Title II racks or BLM racks.
I'm gonna venture a guess that in the history of the steering committee, we haven't had, has there been an instance where there's just been too many interested people, Pat?
No.
Okay.
No. No, we've had people come in on a one-time basis who were interested in something specific, like that campground for the horse people. There was a group that came in, but just for one meeting.
yeah, I was going to say one thing to note. I don't think the document on the right-hand side is at the same location.
Oh, sorry about that.
But it used to say, like, at the time that when we sent this out and we got the comment saying that, you know, oh, maybe there'll be too many people, we had the wording a little bit different, where it said regularly recruit, and then we took out the regularly and changed it to just recruit, and then it says recruit from all these different groups to represent the community. So our intent with that was that maybe that in itself just solves it, taking out the regularly part, because it's just like recruit from all these different groups kind of implies, like, I don't know, maybe that it doesn't have to go on forever and ever if you feel like you've represented the community. So that was our initial thought of how to resolve it, and maybe that's done it, or maybe we need to add wording that makes it more clear, like what we've been talking about.
Do you actually recruit, or is it more like you receive?
There have
Currently,
been recruitment in the past.
We've recruited, I mean, for example, we didn't have anybody representing the industrial side of the timber industry kind of folks, and we recruited Clarence Rose specifically to join us. Bob Morris, we specifically recruited him to join, representing environmental folks.
We recruited Alan Sigmiller to coordinate with the trails.
Right, to get TA involved.
My only comment is to just make sure that we're not just limiting it just to interest groups, to make sure that we allow for just members of the public that want to participate that aren't necessarily associated with a specific group.
Interested parties, yeah.
Okay, sounds good. So I think we can probably just say,
Liked what Laura had said.
so maybe add like outreach to recruit new members, blah, blah, blah. And just add onto this list like interested individuals. That sounds good. Getting a few head shakes. Okay. Say new members and interested individuals, I suppose. Does that capture what we've been talking about?
I might word it a little differently with the interested individuals at the end of the list of like, you know, you have all these interest groups and other interested individuals, but we can wordsmith it later too. But I think overall.
Okay, yeah, I think I have it in my notes and maybe we can come back to it, but I think it sounds like we're understanding kind of what we want to do. Well, if I could find the bold thing again. Well, I'll highlight it in my notes. Okay.
So Kathleen, I know we were making like really great progress. So in the vein of being a good government bureaucrat, can we go back?
Yeah.
To, can you scroll backwards? There's a, up on the top where it says manage to me. So 1.B.1 to manage the Weaverville Community Forest according to community needs. I think I'm struggling a little with according to community needs because we have a really fine balance on the BLM and potentially on the Forest Service side that we have to manage the community forest, you know, kind of according to all of our like governing policies and community needs. So I'm not sure if, you know, maybe I'm just being a little hypersensitive to that phrase, or if we need to make it a little softer. I don't know if that's making sense. But I can't just, yeah, I can't just manage the community forest according to the community needs. I have to take into you know, consideration other guiding documents, other laws and regulations, and community needs. And I know we emphasize the community piece because it is the community forest, but
yeah, I think that makes sense to me. I think
maybe changing it to emphasizing community needs. Manage the Weaverville
or
Community Forest,
incorporating.
emphasizing community needs.
Yeah, I think either one of those sounds good to me, emphasizing or incorporating.
Yep.
Anyone have strong feelings about one or the other? That's what
What were
sounds
the two
best.
choices?
Manage the WCF, emphasizing community needs, or maybe like with emphasis on community needs, or Kenneth suggested manage the WCF, incorporating community
Or
needs.
with sensitivity, with sensitivity to community needs. But yeah, Jennifer's point is well taken. The federal government is the agency responsible for managing these lands, and they definitely are open to community input on, not just on the community forest.
Yeah.
I guess that's why I like emphasizing, because it kind of gets at that, like, that's the whole point of this steering committee, et cetera, is that we want a greater emphasis on that community need here than maybe some random parcel somewhere.
Kelly, I see you're talking, but your sound's not coming through. You're not muted, or at least doesn't look like it. But...
Read my lips.
Yeah, I still can't. I don't know if it's just me, but
Oh, we can't. I think it's Kelly's microphone acting up again, maybe.
uh-oh.
Thought somebody was at a truck stop.
What was that, Pat?
That rumbling sound sounds like somebody sitting at a truck stop.
Yeah, I'm not sure who that might be.
So-
Okay,
so-
well, I
So
think,
as long as we're talking about this sentence, needs kind of bothers me. I mean, community interest, community, but I don't know. It's not a big issue, but I don't know what we mean by needs.
I think interest works too, or like community desires or something like that.
Yeah.
Emphasizing community interest. That sounds good to me.
Okay. I'm getting other head shakes. Is that all good? Okay. Manage the WCF. Emphasizing community, we said interests?
Yeah.
Interests. Okay, and I'm gonna
And get rid of
bold-
the two.
right here.
No, between
Oh,
emphasizing
yes.
and community.
Emphasizing community interest. Sounds good. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and
Thank
put
you.
this right here. Yeah, thanks for bringing that up, Jennifer. And I'm gonna bold it so I remember to do that in other places. Okay. Any other thoughts people are feeling we've skipped over so far? I'll jump back into the agenda otherwise. Okay. All right. So next we had, well, Osley realized that we didn't have a guideline saying update the strategic plan regularly. So we added that, basically just update as we have been at regular intervals. Ideally probably completing the next and all following updates before the year that they're supposed to begin. And we also added kind of a sub thought to consider writing a specific forest management plan aside from a strategic plan, but wanted to bring that up with everyone since that's kind of a new idea. So does anyone have thoughts or objections on that? Kenneth, I think you're muted right at the moment. I think you're muted, Kenneth. Maybe I can- There you go.
Sorry, I was I thought I was unmuted.
That's okay.
Okay, all my comments have been going nowhere. Well, anyway, this could be quite complicated because you have two federal agencies who have their own guidelines for management, and to put together a management plan could be challenging and might be rather costly.
Yeah, I tend to agree.
Okay, so I think we should just nix that part about forest management plan. I'm getting some head
Yeah.
shakes.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think so.
Okay,
We just considered it.
we did it. Let's see. Okay. But do people feel okay about update the strategic plan guideline? That's a new one we haven't seen yet.
yeah.
So that looks good.
Awesome. Kelly, and I saw you were talking again, but your sound's still not coming through. I'm not sure what's up. Okay. We also adjusted kind of and combined a little bit what you see on the right as having been 1C32 and 1C33. So we combined that into one guideline with kind of subparts, being that we consider having a meeting that I don't believe we currently have and maybe have not had in the past, some kind of annual kind of steering committee meeting, just to talk about how priorities may have changed from last year, what new sources of funding we may need, etc. And I know I believe Jennifer had mentioned to Ozalie and I at some point kind of the timeline for when BLM needs to be thinking about new project funding. And we were thinking that that was in January or December. So we said to have this meeting in November or December before, just as that is happening. I'm sure it may be slightly different on Forest Service, and unfortunately I don't see anybody from Forest Service on the call, but yeah, that is pretty much how that has been edited. Does anybody have any objections?
Can you hear me? It's Colleen.
Yes, yes, we got you.
The only problem with having it late in the year is that most federal employees have built up a lot of overtime and they take it. So attendance may not be what we'd like. So if we were going to do it, if we put it on the calendar and scheduled ahead of time, we could do it in January when everybody was back and still kind of fresh and get it done then. I don't know what other people think, but those are my thoughts.
Well, my recollection of the AOP is that it's the federal fiscal year, so it actually starts in October. So then we're 3 months into the fiscal year by the time we sign it, which isn't, I mean, I don't have a big preference either way. January has worked in the past, and the BLM and Forest Service generally have all of their budgets sorted out by that time. Your next point where it says update the AOP annually in August to September, I just think that's too early from my experience on the Forest Service side for people to understand their budgets and know what funding they have for the next fiscal year. So that's why I had proposed like a November or December, but Colleen has a good point with the January AOP time as well.
So I think just to clarify, these would be two separate meetings that we have brainstormed. At least, you know, this obviously can change, with the first one being a not specific to the AOP meeting, just talking about what the steering committee's priorities are, and you know what funding we may want to be talking with BLM and Forest Service that is needed on the community forest, or what kinds of grants the RCD needs to identify and pursue. So that, you know, is going to influence the next year's AOP. It wouldn't be the current AOP, but wouldn't necessarily be specific to the document itself. And the second bullet point being updating the AOP itself. And I was under the impression that we did the AOP late this year, and they normally occur in the fall, but maybe that was incorrect. So I was thinking that they are kind of like quote unquote supposed to be done before October 1st, when the new fiscal year begins. But if that's incorrect, anybody can feel free to jump out or jump in, I guess.
So going back to the budget, sorry, I had a child that needed something really quick. So I can't, like I said, can't speak to the Forest Service's budget cycle. And I know it's getting weird now with their new regionalization process, but for BLM, we're in the process now of putting in our projects for 22 funding. So I think the things are due in the system in the next like couple of weeks. So, you know, we would want to start talking about projects that we're wanting to look at in the next, you know, for this year. I would have wanted to start talking about those projects with the community forest, you know, in kind of the first part of the year. So if that doesn't meet, you know, if November, December doesn't work because people are on a lot of leave, you know, definitely right after the first of the year, we start not only looking at our program of work for the calendar year we have to get done, but starting to look at the, you know, program of work for 22 should it get funded. So for BLM, doing it, you know, in January, I think would be okay. You know, if it's implementation money or if it's money for planning, you know, we would be okay. We just can't implement and plan in the same year. It doesn't work very well.
So Jennifer, and then when would you want to be having the meeting to finalize the AOP for that same fiscal year?
So probably, I mean, we could look at the AOP and what we plan to do. We typically get our like priorities set for what we plan to do, usually the first part of the year. The hard part for us is we don't have a budget. We're usually on, you know, traditionally some continuing resolution from the time our fiscal year actually starts in October until, I mean, it's April 2nd and I don't have an official budget. Like budgets have been passed, but I still don't have actual numbers. Like these are your budget numbers yet from the Washington office. So, you know, maybe in a couple more weeks, we have preliminary budget numbers, but we don't have formal ones yet. So, but we typically are looking at, you know, our kind of what the actual year looks like for us and what we're planning to get done and have set our priorities at the first part of the actual calendar year. Just because Colleen's right, by the time we do our budget closeout in, you know, September and October, and then people are on use or lose time in the holidays, then we kind of gear back up in January.
So just to recap for BLM, it would make sense to have the two meetings, like both potentially in January, one where we're thinking, okay, what do we want for 2022? What are we trying to think ahead for in terms of getting funding and budgeting for all the responsible agencies? And then also the second meeting being, okay, what are we actually getting done in 2021, for example? that both of those meetings could happen in January, and that would be an effective time as far as BLM is concerned.
I would think so. Especially because the AOP, we also have like a forecasted out time frame in the AOP. So
Right.
we are, it shouldn't be a surprise what we're working on
Yeah.
in 21 theoretically, because we should have already kind of seen it coming.
I like having it after the annual October community meeting, because then we can hear from the community if we have any project ideas or new plans that they would like to see implemented. That can come up in October and things can ruminate before a January meeting.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah, I think that sounds good.
Okay.
So I have another question. So 2 major project planning meetings annually, are these in addition to the quarterly meetings, or are these 2 of the quarterly meetings?
That's a good point. I mean, I think that is up to us, up to the group and the steering committee. I think it sounds like we'll have to check in with Forest Service about what their budget cycle looks like to make sure January sounds good for them too. But I think if we're having both of these meetings in January, potentially if it's not too much information in one meeting, maybe if we're having them at the same time anyway, that maybe that is just the first quarter meeting for the steering committee. But that's a good point, Pat. What do other people think?
So right now what we have proposed, Kathleen, and I don't know if you've been, I know I haven't CC'd you on the emails that I've sent, so I don't know if you've been privy to this, but the current proposal for the remaining quarterly meetings would be Wednesday or Thursday, the 3rd week of May, August, and November. And I think it would be very easy to kind of reset that calendar for 2022 and to start it in January and move it to January and then April, so that it would be about every 3 months. The reason we have it set to start in May was based off of the steering committee or this process wrapping up and giving us a little bit of space to have our standard quarterly meeting again. And the best time that Osley and I discussed for that would be in May.
Yeah, I think that makes sense for like going forward next year too. Like I like that January, April, July, October. It lines up because January, so far as far as we know, January makes sense for the more project planning stuff. April and July are just kind of on that quarterly pattern, and then October would be nice. We can meet right before the October public meeting. So I think that's a nice setup.
Yeah. Okay. So what I'm hearing is both of these meetings, or potentially combined into one meeting, should happen in January. And then can base the quarterly meetings off of that. And that also fits in with at least BLM's budget cycle. So then I guess the question is, does it sound like too much information to have these meetings be one meeting, or should they stay a little bit distinct?
I think they can be one meeting. I mean, we might want to set a little bit more time aside, but I think they sit hand in hand. We could do them both.
Sounds good to me.
Yeah, I mean, based at least on how the AOP went this year, and that's the only time I've witnessed the process, so I'm definitely not the foremost expert, but it seems like if people, because the AOP is a little bit easier, it's like these are things we already know we're doing, just send me the titles of the projects and the timelines and the amounts. So like if we're able to coordinate that stuff kind of via email and editing your documents and stuff, then we come together and we just like, okay, is the AOP good? good. And then most of the meeting time could be spent on the actual like brainstorming what we're trying to get done the next year and how we can start looking for funding for that.
That sounds good.
Awesome. So I will do a little wordsmithing to make this, to reflect that, and make this kind of sound more like one meeting, and probably just get rid of that language. And I'll save everyone the pain of watching me do that at the moment.
I would say
see.
too, just as someone who's, you know, was relatively new to the steering committee when I was working in forestry, having it very clear, like we meet this many times a year, we do the AOP here, this is what that's for. Or like having that in a concise little paragraph that you could send to new people would be very helpful.
Yeah, I don't know if it ended up getting written in the guidelines, but that reminds me of something that we talked about, was creating like a calendar that we could also show to new people that are like, these are the major benchmarks throughout the year for the WCF. This is when we do the AOP. This is when the public meeting is, and hopefully having that be known ahead of time.
Yeah, so I know there is a guideline in here somewhere that talks about creating internal resources, but I don't know that I specifically talked about a calendar, so I can kind of add that in. Okay. And just to share, Amelia put in the chat, she is meeting some engineers in the WCF at the moment, so she had to leave, and sounds like Forest Service is starting the first Fields and Rec burn today, so that's exciting. It's probably why no one is on the call. I forgot about that. Okay, so I think we're a few minutes behind what I was thinking now, since we got so much awesome planning done, and I didn't have anything else to address in the appendix, so I'm going to jump to the funding plan, unless there's any objections, if somebody had something they still want to talk about. All right. Okay. So this, I think this part of the document, we ended up adding in a little bit more information than in the objective 1 itself, just based on comments, little things we might have left out, or things to edit. So I don't want to call out every single one of those just for time's sake. I think it's all pretty just factual. So I'm hoping there's no controversy with any of that, but please, whenever I send out the follow-up email, make sure to look over the blue text, because that is new or edited. But if, as we're going through, if you see anything that jumps out at you, feel free to say something. So first thing I wanted to bring up specifically, I'm sorry, this highlighted bit was kind of just stuck in there. Didn't make any sense, but I wanted to make sure people saw it and wasn't really sure how to communicate it otherwise. We had this outcome in the old version of the strategic plan to monitor the economic viability of stewardship contracting. And I kind of just wanted to ask the group if that is still something we want to monitor. I think we've been doing stewardship contracting for a little while, and hopefully it seems economically viable enough that we're still doing it. But just wanted to bring up if this is still something that should be on our radar, and so in the plan. I see some gears turning.
I don't know if we still need to do that.
Yeah, That's
I
kind of my
think-
thought as well, but
The context was that when we started the community forest in 2005 with BLM, the stewardship authorities had just been authorized by Congress to go kind of nationwide. There had only been pilot projects before that. And I think that that was something requested of the Washington office of BLM at the time. So I don't know that it's needed anymore.
okay, that was kind of my impression, but I think it had made its way into the more recent update. Probably just copy paste syndrome. So I just wanted to make sure that that was the case. Okay.
Can
So,
you don't go back up a bit?
Yeah.
So I know that I'm probably the only one who worries about this, but throughout, I always worry that we need to make sure that when we're talking about harvesting and retained receipts and their importance to the budget, so to speak, for the community forest, we need to always remember that stewardship authorities identify commercial harvest as a tool, not a primary outcome. You're not supposed to be, planning and designing primarily for timber harvest. You're supposed to be planning for forest health, and all those stewardship benefits. And if a commercial harvest helps you get that done, that's great. But I think we just have to be careful, just generally in the language. And so this ensure consistent harvest frequency and profitability, it's just a fine line. And everybody else may be fine with the language, but we just need to be cognizant of the importance of the stewardship part of the community forest, and that the harvesting is secondary.
Yeah, that's really definitely something to look out for. And I think Pat mentioned to me this morning, and it definitely was not necessarily that was on the front of my mind. I think while we were drafting, Pat is a little more well versed in the stewardship contracts than I am, I'm sure. But did anyone else notice anything that might be crossing that line that specifically we need to edit as you were going through and looking at commenting? I think otherwise we'll just look back through this with a fine-tooth comb and make sure that that is clear.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point from Pat. Like we're not ensuring like harvesting because we need it to be profitable to fund the steering committee. Like we are doing the forest health work because that's our goal, and we need to utilize the funding from that where available.
Because going back to, way before we had the community forest, when Ken Baldwin and his partners actually, went out and did their original stand assessment. And part of the reason for that was the community was originally planning to get into a land trade option with BLM. They thought that was the only way we could keep the forest a forest, and manage it. And my recollection is that the report that Bubba came out with was, it doesn't pencil out, that there's not, and that was, of course, that was just the original BLM acres, but I think that the economics of it has always been tenuous.
Yeah, we found that based on the desires of the committee at that time, in terms of the type of harvesting, the harvest would not pay for the note on purchasing the property and managing it.
Go ahead, Oz.
Yeah, so I have a question, I guess, about how to address this, like how to get this across clearly. So is it the word ensure, for example, needs to be replaced because we're not going to ensure that? Maybe it's more of like something that we aim for, or is that fine, but it's more like we add in language to reinforce the purpose of these harvests is to produce stewardship funding so that we can do stewardship work, which I guess like seems obvious to me, but maybe someone would read it and think that it was harvesting for some other purpose. But you know what I mean? So is it like, how exactly can we fix this? Maybe the impression that this section is giving, how do we fix it?
Well, I think that, as someone else has pointed out, the health of the forest and the fire resiliency of the forest is the primary objective, and any funds that are produced from sale of timber products, logs and firewood, is not the primary purpose. That's a spin-off.
So I think we just need
however
to
you
say that. Yeah.
Yeah. However you can write that up so that emphasizes that, rather than the harvesting is primarily to provide funds for stewardship projects. I think it would be the way to go.
Well, yeah, so I think it's both, and I think I am hearing a little bit of different things. So the harvests themselves are stewardship tools, of course, like we can improve forest health through harvesting, but also they produce funds that allow us to do other types of stewardship work that don't make money, that cost money. So I think it's easy enough to add in language that explains both of those things. I just wanted to make sure that it wasn't something about like the wording of the title also needed to change or taking out anything. I think we can definitely add in that if that sounds sufficient to get the message across.
Yeah, well, I'm not sure when you say ensure consistent harvesting frequency and profitability, I don't know that your harvests are necessarily going to be profitable. In other words, you're going to make, well, I don't know how you determine profitability. I guess if you're making more money than you spent on preparing the sale and logging, then I guess it's profitable.
So I think what I'm hearing is we need to definitely edit kind of the title of this bullet a little bit and make sure that our language is consistent with describing harvest as stewardship, but also enabling other stewardship, and make sure that we're not talking about harvest just specifically and solely as a funding mechanism. Does that sound right?
Yeah. I'm sorry, but what is this under?
Can you scroll up a little bit?
Yeah, so at the moment we're in this funding plan section of the document.
Okay.
So it's not, this isn't an objective. We just wanted to kind of present how the community forest is currently and has historically been funded, and kind of what our issues are and how we want to improve funding moving forward.
Okay. Yeah, maybe we just don't have that. Because really, if it was in a different section, I think we'd want to say ensure forest health through various treatments, whatever that was. And so it's not in that section, it's here. So I'm not even sure we need it, because up above we already state that harvesting alone can't fully fund the stewardship or fund all the other activities. So maybe we don't want that there. What do people think about that?
Colleen, what are you proposing to take out?
The whole thing, A.
Yeah.
I think I could see that, and maybe just elsewhere where we have mentioned harvesting, to kind of say what we've been saying, that harvesting is a stewardship tool and enables other stewardship, because it produces funds. But it sounds like we don't want to focus on, or we don't want to imply that we're focusing on harvesting just, to stuff our pockets.
Well, I don't think we're implying that,
Well,
but
yeah, I don't think it's that far, but
I don't think we want to, we don't want to have this rest on timber harvesting because Kenneth is right and others are right. Timber harvesting, or what we like to call fuels reduction, is just another tool. It can bring money, but to the coffers, but not necessarily. And so I just don't think we need it. I think in the beginning, we all kind of thought that was going to be our ticket. We were going to have all these harvests and it was going to generate all this money and we were going to be able to plow it back into the forest. But that hasn't really panned out. Yeah, I don't think we want to imply basically that harvesting is something we're going to rely on to bring money into the forest. It's just one of many, hopefully, avenues to bring money to the forest.
Yeah,
Right.
and
I
maybe we
think
just
that-
haven't seen enough of the funding plan, but there's other things too, like this. It's
Yeah.
not that's the only funding source. Like we list out, that's the point of the funding plan, is to kind of go into each of the potential avenues for bringing money into the coffers, as you say, Colleen.
Oh, good. No, that's good. But yeah, we do need to change the wording and so that it doesn't sound like we're really leaning like a tree on consistent harvesting to bring money in. Does that make sense?
yes.
Okay.
So I think now what I'm hearing based on Colleen and Osley is keeping but just making sure that it doesn't
Yeah.
sound like our biggest number one funding
Yeah.
source. Okay.
Make it sound like the rest of them.
Okay. Sounds good.
Yeah, because I think looking at what has been done by BLM and Forest Service and the objectives of trying to maintain a fire resilient forest, I think that we're looking at growing bigger trees that are spaced more widely
Yeah.
and basically creating a forest that is like a shaded fuel break, and in order to reduce the chance of catastrophic fire destroying the forest. And that objective is not necessarily going to be conducive to producing a lot of logs from these forests. We're producing logs by taking out codominant intermediate trees that will then promote the health of the residual trees, and eventually we're going to get to a place where the only way you're going to produce any volume is going to be cutting those bigger trees, and I'm not sure people are going to really want to do that in the future.
We don't actually have anywhere that I can think of in California BLM where we manage for consistent, frequent harvest.
Yeah.
Because the way our lands are classified, we don't really, that's not a management goal. We have those lands in Oregon that are kind of managed more in that demeanor, but not really down here.
Yeah. So there you go.
So
yeah, and we haven't seen the Forest Service doing that since the early 90s here on the Trinity side.
Okay, so sounds like we just need to edit pretty much these two paragraphs a little bit and change the title to make sure our intent is really clear. And that'll all come out when I send out the post meeting draft, you'll be able to see that in blue and take a look at that as well, whatever we come up with.
Great.
Okay, and could
Okay.
you scroll up? I had a minor edit, a little in the first or the second paragraph under the section. Keep going.
Yeah.
Okay, let's see. Oh, here where it says volunteer time is also an important part of funding, as it is. I think it should say it is rather than they are. It is as it is considered financial management.
Yeah, makes more sense.
So Kathleen,
Yes.
also in that, the beginning of that paragraph, as you're refining that paragraph A below, you might look at that first sentence. Timber harvesting alone cannot currently fund the, again, that kind of has it backwards. I mean, it's, you know, it's got the emphasis on timber harvesting when in fact it's stewardship that's the primary objective.
Right.
Just finesse that.
Okay.
So the bottom
yeah.
line is to me, the bottom line in the funding plan is that no one source of money will do it all.
Yeah.
The retained receipts is a piece of it when it can be. Grant funds are a piece when it can be, appropriated dollars when we get it, and that, to me, that ought to be, kind of the emphasis of the funding plan is it's got to be, it's multiple sources and opportunistic. The funding plan in any one year is based on where folks think we can grab money from.
Yeah. Okay, sounds good. Yeah, and I want to say also just, I mean, thank you everyone to the group for always participating and bearing with us as we learn throughout this whole process. But I think especially with this section, I'm really appreciating all this great feedback that we're getting today. Because obviously finances are a complicated issue, especially for the community forest. And this is probably where I am the least knowledgeable or experienced. So I really appreciate all this awesome feedback. So this section may look somewhat significantly different when I do send it out post meeting, but that's a good thing. And if there are still edits to remain, just reach out, give me some more comments, and we'll figure it all out. Okay, we are getting a little bit behind my own agenda because we're editing so much good stuff. So I'm gonna scroll down. And I apologize for this huge block of highlighted text. This was kind of my quick and dirty interpretation of how Pat described the rack working to me. So I just wanted to call attention to that. Again, that's something that I don't have a whole lot of knowledge on. So if anybody in there reviewing already or after the meeting sees a mistake or I haven't quite described something correctly, I just wanted to call that out specifically since the rack is kind of coming back online, and that's an important discussion or an important entity for the community forest.
Yeah, in this section, one concern, and Jennifer probably can speak better to this, or Laura, but we got to be careful to not make it sound like we're asking the federal agencies to be advocating to their elected representatives, because that's illegal.
Yeah, that's a great point. Okay, I will make note of that as well. And is there any wording or sentence that's jumping out at you in particular, Pat, or is that just kind of a general comment?
Well, we in the yellow highlighted, you say steering committee should take the opportunity to work with local and federal political. So because the steering committee involves, it says responsible agencies in the larger steering committee. Responsible agencies can't do that.
Okay, yeah. So maybe we
And
edit
the
that to
paragraph
say like,
above that says, I think, the same kind of thing.
okay, so maybe we need to specify just like the what's the word I'm looking for? Like civilian steering committee members should be doing that work. I don't know if the RCD also cannot do that kind of advocating, but
They can, if they're using federal money, they can't be advocating.
okay.
Yeah.
Well, I don't understand the purpose of this section C.
I think it's mostly, I know Pat has done some work, you know, individually and through the collaborative and all the awesome stuff he's involved with, working with Jared Huffman, our representative, on just like the allowable use of retained receipts. So that's kind of what the first paragraph is trying to get a little more flexibility on how we can use that. And that is somewhat of a specific Forest Service issue. And yeah, the second paragraph, I think we just wanted to emphasize historically how important the RAC has been for community forest funding, as Pat had painted that picture to me. So the whole section C is kind of just us, the steering committee at least, or the civilians of the steering committee, trying to like use political leverage to get more like funding flexibility, I believe, for the community forest. I don't think I'm really describing this very well, so if other people have thoughts, jump in, but.
I mean, yeah, certainly the Title II RAC was really important, hopefully can be again. But I just really wonder if in a document that that's going to have, you know, all of our agencies listed as authors of it, whether the paragraph is appropriate at all. It just better not in black and white.
Right.
I
Yeah,
don't
that's
know.
a fair point.
Well, I mean, I think if the purpose of the paragraph is to really, I mean, if you kind of boiled it down, right, it's to make sure that we are trying to take advantage of opportunities that exist for other sources of funding, like the Forest Service grant, the Forest Service RAC, right? Where you don't really like, I mean, I guess you, I don't want to know. Look, I can't even say the word. You don't necessarily, I mean, you apply for funding through the grant, through the RAC, right? So it's not like you
Right.
have to lobby, you know, your
It's a
political representatives.
it's a
really.
grant. Yeah, it's a grant process.
Right. And then on the other piece, it's really, you know, trying to resolve an issue or fix an issue that exists with retained receipts with the Forest Service. I don't know, maybe to me, it just seems like, you know, it not, maybe we don't need to be so specific. We could say, you know, something about will, work to, address funding barriers as they exist or something. I mean, I guess I'm not clear on why, like what the need for the specificity is in the strategic plan.
Mhm.
It seems like if we're going to be more strategic, we would put something in there about, identifying, continuing to identify barriers for funding sources and committing as a steering committee to work through those. And then you could say such as the retained receipts issue with the Forest Service, but you don't have to actually tie it to, advocating to your political representatives. The mechanism as to how you get there is probably less relevant than just getting there. And the same thing with the RAC funding, right? Like you guys want to go after RAC funding, if behind the scenes you need to advocate to your political representatives to push some sway on, Forest Service Title I RAC funding, that's fine. But really, the strategic process is that you will apply for grant funding through the Forest Service, RAC funding through the Forest Service.
Yeah. So maybe at the, Kathleen, at the top of the funding plan, we just say, but yeah, basically like what Jen just said, like we'll recognize and address barriers to any like consistent funding as needed. And then, but to clarify, like the reason the RAC is here is obviously it would be more of like a grant thing, except that I think the reason it was here was because of concern of whether it would continue to exist even as an opportunity. So it was like, maybe we need to be more active about making sure it even exists. But yeah, I think that can be summarized, like you were saying, Jen. We can put it at the beginning of the funding plan, just saying we'll try to resolve those barriers as a group, however we need to.
And so it sounds like with that, Osley, we're basically getting rid of section C, correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
Unless anyone has objections.
Okay, I think that makes sense. Yeah, we definitely don't want to just put ourselves in hot water that we boiled. So I am just going to, I don't see a strike through option. I think what I'll do is just put this in red to tell myself that we're getting rid of that. Okay. Oh yeah, we are getting a little behind. So I think let's try to move quickly in our discussions. So I wanted to kind of just bring up this idea of community funding as a funding mechanism opportunity. It would be small, compared to a harvest, but I think it is something that would, some of the examples that I thought of, or other examples that we haven't thought of yet, could be things that would benefit the community, and could bring in, small monies for stewardship or just running the steering committee and that kind of thing. So for example, like working with Friends of the TCRCD, to see where we can use monies for a community forest, when it is good for us, selling fuel wood, selling reeds, or like our community forest shirts, kind of things like that. Pat brought up to me that at some point we were trying to work with a group that wanted to use Doug fir from the community forest to make tea. So that's kind of what that information is supposed to capture. Does anyone have any objections to including that sort of thing, or thoughts on that topic? Okay, I'm hearing and seeing nothing. So we're okay with talking about this sort of quote unquote community funding. I don't know if there's a better word for it either.
I don't know. I don't know if the Friends is really going to have the capacity to do anything like that.
Okay.
I see the Friends is more of a nonprofit arm of the RCD that could obtain grants and maybe provide matching for other grants. But I don't see fundraising or donations as part of that. Okay.
Yeah, well, and the Friends are still a little bit of a mystery to me. So if that's not the correct way to talk about them, we definitely want to edit that. I think I was thinking like if somebody wanted to donate, just out of their goodness of their hearts, like we just had that big donation for summer camp this past year. Like if somebody wanted to donate $5,000 to the community forest.
Oh, yeah.
In general.
Absolutely. Yeah, the Friends can certainly, and they wanted to get a tax break or tax write-off. Absolutely. The Friends is there for that. I guess I see the Friends as a more passive player in this kind of community, trying to do raise money through the community, which I have to say, I don't know how. It'd take a lot of energy. It probably could be modestly successful, but to raise money somehow for the community forest. But I think it would take a lot of effort and energy, and I'm not sure how successful it would be.
Okay.
Is
So I
this
think-
actually a group, Friends of the TCRCD? Is that a group?
It's a nonprofit organization that's associated with the RCD.
Where you been,
I've
Kenneth?
never heard of them.
What? It's been around for 6 years.
Really? I've never heard of it.
I know. We've done a terrible job on the PR because the person
Either that or I've been.
the person who created it and had high hopes for it ended up having to find work that paid, and so it was neglected. And now that person is me. And now that I'm retired and I'm off the RCD board, I can devote more time and energy to realizing the potential of the Friends, because other RCDs have the same setup, and it becomes quite effective in attracting other monies. So that's what my intention was.
Okay.
So if you want to
Okay,
make so Kenneth, if you want to make a donation out of your vast sums, we are able and willing to take the money.
Well, I made a donation last year or maybe the year before by not charging to go out and look at all those trees with Kelly McElroy.
Yeah,
All the
you did. Yes, you did.
I never charged for my time on that one.
Yeah, in kind is always welcome.
Okay, so I think I will make sure to edit that bullet to make sure we're talking about the Friends correctly. And I think you're right, Colleen, that, some of this, a lot of this is not, just things we can do on the fly. It takes planning and that kind of thing also. But
Yeah.
But I think I have, in the time I've been here, kind of like heard these things thrown around a lot, just as like things we want to do that also provide community benefit. And it's kind of just like, and they would just happen to make a little bit of money potentially that we could use for the forest, or at least even just use to pay for planning that thing.
I think we'd probably have better luck with some of the other foundations and nonprofits in the area to get little pots of money to match other money to fund those kinds of things. I actually think that would probably be easier and more successful, or have a better chance of being successful.
Okay. I feel like that is probably not something I've really captured yet. So maybe just in the interest of time, since it's already 2 o'clock, maybe Colleen, I'll reach out to you.
Sure.
At some point after the meeting, and we can figure
Yeah.
out.
Sure, that's fine.
So some of the things that are listed here, we probably want to be real, we want to separate this out and kind of talk about, it kind of goes back to the same thing as like lobbying, and be real clear that, it would be, the RCD or some other third party kind of organizing those things and not include the
Right.
federal agencies.
Yeah.
We can't raffle or have auction type things. And it's been more than a few managers go down
Yeah.
No.
Oh,
in a
yeah.
ball of flames for a lot of these kind of things that are listed here. So,
Okay.
so yeah, we should probably, we could look at, I think maybe a way to organize this list so that we're clear on, like, yes, that, from the BLM side, we have an opportunity to sell, kind of raw, vegetative materials, permits, or give those to, out to people. But a lot of these like fundraisers, storefronts, donation-based events, and the raffles need to be very clearly under a sub-bullet that doesn't imply any federal government involvement.
Okay. I think maybe on that point, Jennifer, I can add in a sentence up here and just say that this will be kind of like an RCD-led effort.
Yeah.
In general.
I mean, like it's an interesting list because it like things like sale of non-timber biomass after completed treatment, like that's totally fine. Like,
Hmm.
You know, we could keep that in there. That's a thing we can do, but it's some of the other things.
Right, right. No, that's definitely, this is
Give me
why
Yeah.
we all have to talk.
Yeah.
Okay. And I think I did want to talk about this table a little bit, but I feel like it'll make more sense after we've talked about priorities. And like I said, we're running low on time. So just as like a quick intro, we're kind of thinking of this as a very high level idea to look at the things that we do want to do in this 8-year planning period that's covered by the strategic plan, and kind of just broadly look at what are the things that are making money, what are the things that are costing money, what types of grants or grants or federal funding might we want to pursue in the next 8 years, to actually get done what we want to get done. So this is very high level estimating, not identifying necessarily specific grants or even specific projects, but just trying to get a very macro idea of the income and costs that we'll be having in this planning period. But I think unless anybody has something burning, I'm going to jump forward to the prioritization information.
Sounds good.
Okay. All righty. So Osley and I fleshed kind of just this little introduction out a little bit more after we got the survey results that we had included in our most recent emails to the steering committee about priorities. So again, this is a lot of new information that I don't want to go through with a fine-tooth comb at the moment, but it will definitely be included in the draft that goes out after the meeting. So just be sure to give that a read. And I think Oz is going to talk a little bit, kind of, you can leave it here for now. Oz is going to talk about the results of the survey that a lot of you filled out.
Could I say one thing here about your bullets? On
Yeah,
the
go for it.
last one, it says continuing timber harvest. Why don't you say continuing forest health treatment?
Yeah, i.e. what we've been talking about.
And that was just like that because that's how the person had written it, right?
Yeah,
we were just trying to see.
someone had said that their priority was timber harvest, which, you know, obviously we talked about that topic. So maybe I can just say, like, for example.
Yeah, so these bullets are just taken from one of the questions on the survey. For those of you that did it will know, it was just like a short answer style question of what do you most care about on the community forest? You know, maybe that wasn't captured by the other questions, and so we were just trying to stay true to what the people had said. So yeah, so for the survey results, I think the bigger question first, and Kathleen, I don't know if you want to talk about it, is just like whether or not we should even be prioritizing activities was a conversation that I think you had had. I don't know if you want to talk about that a little bit before I.
Yeah, sure. So I've, you know, in talking with some of you and some other steering committee members that weren't able to attend today, there are lots of different opinions about whether we should prioritize at all or to what level we should prioritize, and how we talk about priorities. I think as a group, we're pretty all over the spectrum on how to include this information or whether to even include this information. So I think that's just something we need to keep in mind, and I think this is going to be one of the trickier issues we tackle. But as all things, you know, everything is editable. But just so you know, we're on the spectrum from taking it out entirely to quantifying it and ranking it and that kind of thing. everything in between.
So so we sent out that survey just as like a reconnaissance effort to figure out what was out there if we were going to go the more quantitative ranking route. And so, yeah, we'll go through what the results of that were, but I think that's an important preface, what Kathleen just said, that it doesn't mean it has to appear that way, or that information is complete, or that it needs to be in there. So that conversation isn't over, it hasn't even really begun. But so I just took the rankings from that survey and averaged together how people had ranked each activity within each objective, and there were no ties. So I just created like a simple 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 ranking system within each objective. So you could see them, they're in there if you want to scroll, Kathleen. So this is just directly from the 15 responses we got on that survey. So, which again is obviously incomplete, only 15 responses. It doesn't incorporate, we did a survey at the public meeting in the fall, for those of you who were there. We did a survey similarly to everyone who was present at that was before we knew the exact names of activities and things that would end up in this plan, but generally lined up with asking people what they cared about on the community forest. And by far the most popular response on that survey was wildfire resilience. So we were talking about how to summarize that piece of information, maybe in the text before, if we do go the route of having tables based on this survey. We talked about maybe trying to get more responses from the public on this particular survey. We've talked about all kinds of things, but this is what the results look like just based on those 15 responses from the steering committee. So you can see it's just by objective, all of the activities are ranked. And then, yeah, I guess I'll let you, Kathleen, talk about all the other aspects of these tables and the ranking process.
Yeah. So I guess first, just, I know you can't see all of the information at one time, but is anybody seeing anything like any major concerns kind of with how the priorities have washed out, at least for the steering committee? I can scroll around as requested.
I don't see any major concerns. I just think it was really, it's difficult to make a priority list, especially if you go back to the one that's more based on vegetation management. Because ideally, if the whole goal there is a healthy forest ecosystem, then you can't necessarily prioritize one of those things. I mean, we could do 4 or 5 of those activities in one treatment in order for the treatment to be effective. So I always have a hard time thinking about, prescribed fire and thinning, and even commercial timber harvest independently of one another, because often when we thin, we're still doing prescribed fire. To commercial timber harvest, we're also thinning and doing prescribed fire. So they're really not separate items.
Right.
And the same thing with like native planting and weeds treatment. And so, I think it's hard to prioritize those because that's not, as an agency, how we work. We don't, we have a set of given priorities in a year, but ultimately, like, we dabble in most of the things on the list.
Yeah, and I think that absolutely makes sense. I think a lot of these things do go hand in hand. I could still see it maybe, and not identified with this idea, but even given that, I think that's for the land manager sort of a given. Like, of course, some of these things go hand in hand, but I could see it. Maybe my question is like, maybe is it still helpful to see, okay, thinning, prescribed burning, commercial harvest, like maybe we do all those things at once, and those are the top 3, so maybe we should be designing that or prioritizing that over making the first thing that we get on the docket be an invasive species removal project. Like, obviously some of these things go together, but maybe is there still some helpfulness of seeing the stratification like that? That's the question I guess I still
And I also just want to briefly interrupt and make people aware that it's 2:15. I was hoping we would get to this a little bit earlier and have more time, but just so people know.
So
Pat, I
I
think you're
didn't
on mute.
understand. Me?
No, Pat, I think is on mute.
Oh, he's talking. Well, while he's figuring out whether he's on mute or not, this advocacy for sustainable surface water use, what is that all about? I mean, who is, I don't understand where that came in or how that
So
got on that list.
Yeah, that mostly came out of a conversation conversations that I've had with Amelia and some staff at the Watershed Center, that we just have issues with surface water, mostly illegal surface water takings in the watershed, which of course affects the community forest. So while there aren't any residential properties on the community forest, there aren't people necessarily taking from a creek within the boundaries per se. It is something that impacts the community forest, but all we can really do on that issue is like advocate for education and try to educate people about their water use and what they're allowed to take. So that was kind of an activity that we had talked about.
And also, yeah, we were directed in doing some of the research and the background stuff in the forest management section. We were directed by some folks on the Watershed Council to look at the integrated fisheries management plan for the Klamath Basin, which includes the Trinity River Subbasin, which includes some of the creeks on the community forest. And what that was one of the things was, and not just illegal water use, just the way surface water is used. That was one of the main things listed in that plan. That was like, we need to think about how the CSD uses water and where we get our water in the summer and all those things. So yeah, that was the only way that the only action we could think of that, maybe the RCD could when we hear recommendations for changes in how surface water is used around Weaverville, that could be something that we are involved in, because it does affect the community forest.
But I guess I would just like to hear a little more from people kind of about how we do, or if we use this information. Some things to think about might be if we do rank them quantitatively, saying this is priority number 1, this is priority number 2, or do we maybe just say this is high priority, this is medium priority? Do we want to try to quantify, dollar ranges, or just kind of put this $1 sign, $2 sign, cheap, expensive? I know this is a lot of info, but.
So now I'm off of mute. So I'm certainly advocate against numerically ranking all these things. In my mind, if it's in the strategic plan, it's a high priority. If it's not a high priority, it's not there. And I worry when you start going to funders, they say, well, you say it's in my strategic plan and it's priority number 8, that's going to hurt your ability to get money.
Yeah, I think that's one of my concerns with it too. I definitely see that. I'm curious what other people think, just because I know, like with Laura and other people, we've had the conversation of like, okay, but there's so much in the plan, so how do we know what to actually do? So it's kind of like a trade-off between, and so we tried in the text before the tables, which maybe we scrap the tables and we only have the text, but in the text before the tables, we did try to address that a little bit by saying, like, we're not trying to make anything look low priority, everything that's in here is important, exactly what you just said, Pat, but I still have the same concern that, yeah, it does make certain things, obviously by necessity, look less important, which is not great. So I'm curious what other people think about that trade-off, because there is obviously then the benefit that some people have brought to us, that it's sort of necessary to have some prioritization, or else you can't tell what to do next, you know, what to do first, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I think you characterized my point of view quite succinctly. Just that, yeah, that there's a lot of stuff in here, and even though it's all work we want to do, it's not all going to get done. So just, I think it's helpful to see, like, and while I agree with Jennifer that, you know, we're going to use the best treatment for the site, not necessarily be like, oh, well, people really want to see thinning and not commercial harvest, so we're not going to consider commercial harvest. Like, I don't think we would do that. We'll use the best treatment for the area. But at the same time, I think it is, you know, good to be clear that, like, the emphasis is really like forest health treatments, wildfire protection, that sort of thing, and everything else is just supporting a healthy ecosystem. I don't know, that sounds weird to say just supporting a healthy ecosystem, but
oh, you know.
You know, as the person who used to run the weeds program, like, I get it, weeds are important, but like maybe not as important as, you know, getting the thinning done. So I don't know, it's a balance, maybe scrapping the tables, but just providing kind of a written summary, or like you have here, basically saying, like, you know, most surveys of steering committee members and the public have pointed out that forest health treatment and fire resiliency is the most important, you know, issue. But yeah, for the recreation section too, I know to me, it's important to see that, like, there's a lot of stuff in the recreation section that to my mind is more like, it'd be good to do if we can do it, but maybe not the most important thing, which would be like maintaining those trails that we have.
Yeah.
Can people hear me?
Yes, you're back.
I was under the impression that the prioritization wasn't so much to, like, just straight up create a list of, you know, like, what I thought it was more just for, like, organizing the actual document and highlighting the things that are our priorities by bringing them to the top of the list of any given objective. Am I not correct in that?
Yeah, that was something that I think we talked about a little bit in a previous meeting, and we talked about, I think, potentially with Laura too, that could be one way to do it. Maybe within the appendix of each objective, we just have some formatting thing. Either it's like the order, or highlighting or bolding or asterisking things that we want to stand out. We talked about that a little bit. And I think we had, again, mixed reviews. I seem to remember someone saying they didn't like that. So yeah, we're just trying to figure out the best way of doing it. And I think that's definitely one option that we've discussed. This was the way originally in the plan, or the way that we've had it in the draft, was with tables from the beginning. So we decided to give that a shot and see what it looked like and see what people's responses were.
I think the tricky thing is I'm not sure how to conclude this issue. I'm not sure what approach to decide on, and it's 5 minutes to 2:30. So I don't know if anybody has a thought about a plan of attack, or if maybe this is something.
Don't have prioritization. Just don't even put that word in there.
Well, that's my thinking, that if we don't really, like, emphasize the fact that, oh, these are prioritized in such and such a fashion, and just have them listed as such, to me, it sort of indicates that that's, you know, that those are important things because they're listed in such a fashion, but we're not attracting attention to it as this is the most important thing and this the least important thing. Just my thinking on it.
Yeah, I guess my question is like how to reconcile. I feel like we have very, very different opinions. Not me personally, but just within the call and within the larger steering committee, some people that couldn't be here. So I don't know,
Well,
maybe the
as
approach is, oh, go ahead, Kelly.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to, I thought you were
No, that's okay.
pausing for a moment. You know, when I look at them, you know, aren't these activities, you know, essentially listed? I mean, what, you know, like I guess I don't see a need to have them codified in a table, you know, that says this is the priority rank in them, that these are all specific activities that are listed within the actual document, and just having them basically in this order. And the orders, as I scroll up and down through, because I got the Google Doc open, but as I look at each of the different ones, to me, they pretty much jive with what I would think, you know, my sort of internal prioritization is of, you know, like for accessible community and cultural use opportunities, enhancing the trails, number one. Like that's the first thing we're going to list, because that's what we've identified as being sort of, you know, largely the most important part, you know, versus, you know, like, and the same thing with, you know, under responsible forest management, the thinning, prescribed fire, you know, commercial timber harvest, those are sort of this sort of, you know, listing them out as their activities where they're acting, where the activities are called out further up in the document, I guess, just to me makes sense, and just leave it at that.
Okay, what about, so we could reorder the activities in the guidelines and leave that just purposely vague and not explain the order that they're in, if that's the most palatable option that everyone could agree on. And then maybe we could like take a vote on whether in addition to that, this is just a brainstorm, whether in addition to that, we want also a written narrative that like we have under prioritization at the top, just a written thing saying like in community surveys, we found wildfire resilience to be a high priority, you know, very broad level things. So we could reorder the activities in the appendices and then, yeah, vote on whether or not this section, just a written thing, no tables, should exist or not. What about that?
I think that's great.
Yeah.
Okay. You want to run?
Yeah, I can see like in the those first three bullets on management, you could say something like create a healthy fire resilient forest through activities such as timber harvest, thinning, and prescribed fire.
Yeah, and I mean, that's already a sub-objective that's been defined. So we could just say the community identified this sub-objective consistently as a top priority. So should we run a vote really quick? It takes maybe 1 minute to see if we should have this section or not.
I mean, I feel like I'm the kind of the only person on the other side, and that sounds like a good way to do it. I think you have thought through it well there.
Okay, so can we maybe just get an aye or a no on Ozzy's suggestion? All the ayes?
Aye. Colleen says aye.
Sounds good.
Repeat your suggestion. I'm sorry.
I guess, yeah, I was wording it as a vote, but I guess the suggestion is we reorder the guidelines, or in the appendices with the guidelines, we reorder the activities based on the ranking that's now in the tables, but don't explain that we've put them in priority order. Then delete the tables and refine this written section to just summarize broadly that the community often has emphasized wildfire resilience as a priority.
Yeah.
Aye.
Aye.
I vote aye.
And I think you could almost even relate back to the original visioning that the
Yes.
community had.
Yes,
That those are the things that were the priorities then, and they're still the priorities now.
right.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I mean, really, the sort of the, and correct me, old timers, originals, but it was like, it was fire resiliency. It was sort of the larger umbrella was forest health. And then under that, you'd say fire resiliency, healthy stands or healthy, healthy tree, you know what I'm saying? And high visual quality was important, and
Mhm.
recreation / trails were important. And so out of that falls all the other things that we want to do. I mean, yes, certainly improved water quality in West Weaver Creek was cited by some. Eradication of noxious weeds was cited by some. Road improvements through the forest was another one. But the main emphasis was improve forest health through the following activities. Increase fire resiliency, manage the forest for healthy stands, um, promote and maintain good recreational opportunities, and so on and so forth. So, out of that could fall almost everything you need.
Yeah, so and just for reference to jog people's memory, if you haven't seen it in a while, we did actually copy in the original vision of the community forest that I have on my screen here.
There you go.
And yeah, and I did actually, I forgot to bring up in the agenda, but was gonna ask briefly if this does still communicate our plan, or if we need to edit at all.
No, I don't actually think so, because really under forest health, you could just throw everything else. Yeah.
That is true.
And under reduce fire hazard, what forest health wouldn't capture, fire hazard would, but fire hazard probably wouldn't capture, recreational activities would. High visual quality just sort of stays as it is, but ties back to how we manage the forests and the timber harvesting that will occur from time to time.
Yeah, so I would think, and I know it's 2:30, so if people need to jump off, no hard feelings. But I would think the only thing we might want to add into here is alluding to our education objective, and
oh yeah, that would be
maybe something about like including the community in management, to kind of allude to our collaborative decision-making objective. But that's just an idea. That doesn't have to be something that's decided.
You could put you could put and community-based participation.
Well, there you go.
That's what it is. Our federal partners and our other partners participate, are part of it, but it really is community-based, and that was one of the kind of fundamental tenets of this effort back in the day.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, I think something else that
Bye, Laura.
should be, what?
Go ahead.
Oh, that should be included. We talk about forest health. We talk about reduced fire hazard, which is really, we probably want to say fuel hazard, but I think it's important to put something in about increase or ensure forest resiliency, because you could have a healthy forest of young trees that are not resilient to fire. In other words, the fire comes through, and because of they've got crowns low to the ground and they've got thin bark, the fire kills them all. Whereas if you have a forest of larger trees with thicker bark and the base of the crowns are well above where they can be scorched or caught on fire, then you have a resilient forest. If a fire goes through, the forest survives, and that's resilience. That's a resilient forest.
So maintain a healthy, resilient forest that emphasizes.
Yeah, that's what I would say.
Okay, and then we could, right, and then that would that would take care of all the activities we would do to increase resiliency and protect the forest.
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly.
Okay, sounds good. So I will add in something about community education and participation as well. And try not to make this a huge run-on sentence. And I think the only other thing to discuss briefly, if people have the time, or I can just throw it up on the screen, is kind of the timeline for finishing the document. So it is April 2nd. We are planning to send out the final draft of the whole shebang document to kind of the subcommittee, pretty much the people that have just been attending these monthly meetings on the 23rd for you all's review. And, you know, because like Jennifer, you're gonna receive the document at this stage, and also Forest Service, if you could go ahead and share with your staff. I think that would be a good time if you have specialist review that you want to happen. And then I think if any of those types of comments from the agencies could be due on May 11th at the same time as the whole steering committee comments are due. And if we find that more in-depth review is required, I would think that it wouldn't be an issue for additional, you know, steering committee or et cetera comments to come in during the public comment period. We would just want to make sure that anything that is relevant for the public to see happens before the public draft goes out. So like I said, I know it's past 2:30, so I don't want to take up too much of people's time, but this is kind of what the timeline looks like. And we have been going back and forth on whether or not to sort of have a public comment meeting in the middle of the public comment period, just to let people come on Zoom, of course, unfortunately, and give oral comments or have a little bit of a discussion about the plan while the draft is out there. And I think, to me, that sounds like a good idea as a former planner. Colleen, I'm sure you are used to a similar structure.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think that is a good thing for transparency and just getting the community involved and making sure we're getting all the comments that people want to submit. But that is something that we would want to really well advertise, and something we probably need to start planning and getting out there around now, if that is something the group wants to do.
Okay.
Anybody else have objections to having a public meeting during the comment period?
This would be an evening meeting.
Yes. Yeah, I think we would want to prioritize having it primarily after working hours.
Yeah.
So how are you releasing to this final draft to the public? Is that electronically?
I hadn't thought out the nitty gritty yet. I'm sure I'll have instruction from my wise RCD people. And I was going to check in with Amelia about what she did with the CWPP, but I was assuming probably fly a press release in the paper that it's available online, and maybe we can print out some hard copies to keep at the RCD front office if somebody wants to come look at one. Like I said, I'm going just off of my background in planning. I know we would usually, anytime we were publishing a document, keep one like at the library and at the, you know, courthouse and things like that. And I don't know if that is really necessary here. I think just having hard copies at the RCD potentially would work, But so maybe my point is maybe having some hard copies available at places around town, and just putting on our social media and on our website and paper that the draft is available.
Okay.
But if there are other ideas to make it accessible, I definitely want to hear them.
So I guess from the BLM perspective, if you guys want to have a public meeting I would probably say discuss the document rather than, because to me, this is mirroring a very formal decision-based process that we would do for the agencies, but yet this document is not, right? It's not signatory. It's not really a decision. It's a strategic plan. So, I think we'll have somebody potentially attend the meeting, but not really participate in a formal fashion. And I don't know how much more I can ask of my staff in that capacity, since they're currently gearing up to host 4 public meetings already for our RMP, kind of, in this general time frame. But I would recommend, if you're going to do it, maybe it's just to, maybe have a forum for people to ask questions and, get some more information instead of actually having, quote, them being able to, quote, submit comments to the plan via Zoom.
Yeah, and I think that really is more what it would be. I'm probably just still stuck in planner vocabulary. Yeah, because I think that is the really truly the idea behind having a public meeting is, it's a community forest. We want this to be community managed, and so we want to make sure we're catching the people that haven't been able to come to these meetings or don't know that we're doing this yet. So
Right,
yeah,
but you're not going to collect comments. You're not going to respond to their comments. You're not going to, circle back with them to tell them this is the reason why we didn't accept your comment. So I think you just want to kind of stray from it seeming like that's the process.
Yeah, formal.
Some people who might choose to come are going to expect, that will be the process. And I don't think that is what you guys are intending to do. So.
Right. I mean, I think if a random member of the public did want to write up the document and send me a copy, I think we would want to review those comments, but yeah, this isn't like a formal public comment meeting where we're only listening and taking notes. I think it would be more of a forum. But that's useful feedback. Okay. Well, I'm sorry to hold everyone 15 minutes over, and I'm sorry we had to do a little bit of rushing through the end, but I think this was a super, super valuable meeting, and I think we have a lot to go on, and there will be a comprehensive edits in my follow-up, but before we say goodbye for the afternoon, is there anything still on anyone's mind that you want to bring up with the people remaining on the phone? Okay. Well, then, thank you all for being here, and I hope you have a good rest of your afternoon. I can hang out for a little bit, but otherwise, feel free to.
Okay.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone.
Kathleen.
Have a good
Everybody
weekend.
thank you,
eat nice
Kathleen and
chocolate on
Natalie.
Easter.
Adios.
Adios.
Thank you.
Kathleen,
Yes.
why don't I just work on some of that? Why don't I work on the wording for the Friends thing and send it to you?
Okay, that would be helpful. Thank you so much, Colleen. It's good to have you back. Miss you.
Thanks.
I'm gonna stop the recording.
Yeah.